and bring the panelists for engaging in a successful panel discussion. So Massamba, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nitin, and good morning to all of you. This is my pleasure to have this opportunity to welcome you to this session, which is a very important session organized by Digital for Climate. What we believe is that the green transition will need to be a twin, green and digital transition. If you are not able to leverage digital technology to support the green transition, will not be able to succeed. And this is related to many reasons, because the most transformative type of climate and sustainability action are actually enabled by digital technology, but also because the climate policy itself can be supported by digital technology. And this is the focus of D4C. 3 years back, 4 organizations, mainly UNDP, the World Bank, EBRD, and the UNFCCC felt the need to join force and try to push forward a project aiming at the end-to-end digitization of the activity cycle. This is really important, and the lessons that we have learned from the previous mechanism supporting the carbon market, particularly the CDM, the lessons learned from the CDM has shown that something needed to be done to simplify the activity cycle. One of the main problems the CDM was facing was delay in the consideration of submission. So for example, when a project developers submit a methodology, it can take more than 1 year, sometimes 2 years, to have the methodology consider project activities the same. It could take a lot of time before the project is considered. And also particularly the mechanisms were quite complex. And this was one of the main problems that the participants to our mechanism were facing. Too much complex. And this led to the fact that several regions in the world were not able to fully participate to the mechanism. And we wanted to address this problem. We wanted to find way to streamline the mechanism. We wanted to find way to simplify the carbon market, participation to the carbon market. We wanted to find way to reduce the transaction costs. And the best way to do it is an end-to-end digitization of the project cycle. And this is why this was one of the focus of this collaboration. Later on, several organizations joined. And the project is actually in a phase where several testing has been done. And we are about now to explore possibility of implementation. This will really, really help, because this is about identifying all the complexities that are currently in, let's say, climate policy for carbon market, and shifting them at the side of the different, either regulatory body or supporting entities, so that the user of the mechanism does not see any complexity. So you will learn more about this activity of the D4C, Digital for Climate, through this session. And now I would like to hand over back to Nitin for the session to start. Thank you for your attention.
And I now request Gemma, Reina to moderate this panel's discussion.
This one? Oh, yes, this one works. Thank you so much, Massamba, for the opening remarks. And you've been the founding stone of the D4C, so very glad that we've been able to take this journey together for many years. Thank you. So I would like to invite the panel speakers on stage. So starting from Regan Chunga, the National Project Coordinator to CBIT, BTRs, and NCs to the UNFCCC, from the Department of Environmental Affairs and Forestry, Ministry of Environment, Forestry, and Tourism from Namibia. Regan, welcome to the stage. And then next, Rachel Boti-Douyoua, who's in charge of carbon markets and pricing initiatives, Ministry of Environment, Sustainable Development and Ecology Transition from Côte d'Ivoire. Welcome, Rachel. And then Sim Weemin, Director of Carbon Planning Division, National Environment Agency of Singapore. Thank you for coming. And then finally, Gemma Torras, a Climate Change Group of World Bank. And my name is Reina Otsuka. I'm the digital lead for nature and climate at UNDP, and I'll be your moderator for this panel. So just before going into the actual discussion, just to make some framing of what we are doing as D4C working group, as Massamba said, that this is a informal, very collaborative working group. And what you see now showing is a rough picture of what we think is an end-to-end digital ecosystem that is necessary for carbon markets to operate with integrity and transparency. And we are obviously not able to work on all of these, but what we've been doing as a group between UNFCCC, World Bank, EBRD, and UNDP, and also recently the European Space Agency and AITA are also a part of this group. We've been trying to collectively create interoperable system offers from each of our organizations. And just to go through quickly on the elements, from your left, I guess, there's first of all, digital MRV. So for project or program level, you would need equipment and sensors, satellite imagery, different ways of monitoring your project using digital technology. And from there, what is necessary next to it is a national MRV system, which would look like, and which will look at the Article 13 side of the coin. And this NDC tracking, GHG inventory, these are very important elements that are necessary when you think about things like corresponding response adjustments, and also for verification of these projects and results. And then next to that are registries. Now, there are many different registries out there, including, of course, commercial ones. UNFCCC will also have an international registry, but many countries are also embarking on creating their own national sovereign carbon registries. And these are just, what is necessary is access to one kind of registry. So there's no right or wrong answer here. But what we're trying to do is make sure that the countries have access to the registry in the way that fits their own needs. And then next to that is the Climate Action Data Trust, which many of you must know. This is a metadata layer, which means that if by connecting with many of these different registries, it will be the single place where you can actually look at the data and what's happening so that it can be a way of avoiding double counting, or when one credit is retired somewhere, it also shows up in the CAT trust. Then the other side of the registry can also make sure that it is reflected in their system. So it is kind of a central node for interoperability that could happen once this kind of big picture starts to take place. And of course, there's the UNFCCC reporting platforms. And at the bottom, you see that the digital workflow is also very important. This means This is for the ITMO 6.2 transactions. And also, sorry, it's in a wrong place, but there's also the methodology digitalization that UNFCCC Innovation Hub has been doing, which is to digitize, all of the, starting from the CDM methodology, now we're moving toward to our Article 6.4. How do we digitize all of the methodology so that PDDs can be automated instead of everybody having to rely on a consultant to draft everything from scratch? That will really bring transparency to the whole system. So this is what we've been trying to put together. It's been a painful process between us to make sure of interoperability. It's easy to say, but it's very difficult in practice. But now a lot of our data models are somehow interoperable, and especially the digital public good open source registry that UNDP is developing, for example, is now, of course, the data model is the same as what CATRUST has. So that means that when a country downloads and uses the UNDP's open source registry, then they can configure it in the way that it fits the national needs, but also already be interoperable with CATRUST as an option. So that's how we've been approaching. And so today, we're going to talk together to discuss the lessons learned and some key considerations in the development and operationalization, especially of the national registry systems, and what it means to countries. So now moving on to the discussion, Regan, I'll start from you. So how did Namibia prepare for the establishment of your carbon markets and the development of the carbon registry? If you can share some kind of key lessons learned along the way that could be valuable for other countries who are embarking on this journey now.
Okay, I assume you can hear me now. Good morning once again. My name is Regan Chunga, as introduced earlier. I work for the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and Tourism back home. I'm mostly back home, that's Namibia, sorry. I mostly work on preparing biannual transparency reports and national communication, by the mere fact that carbon credits are basically based on your greenhouse gas inventory. I also got roped into working on carbon markets partially. On the one side, I want to say that we just started the process. We haven't really started with the carbon trading. So to begin with the process, we got support from the Japanese government to basically develop a carbon market framework. And during the process of developing the framework, we did an assessment of the policies, the legal, technical, and administrative arrangements. So we had the 2 rounds of assessments, and the findings from that assessment was that Namibia looks at taking a hybrid approach, incorporating Article 6.2 and 6.4, and also the voluntary carbon markets. This was identified from the consultation or from the assessment as the best fit for Namibia. So we are also thinking of using existing administrative functions which were set up under the CDM structures, were deemed adaptable to for carbon market governance. Of course, our NDC serves as a foundation for establishing bilateral and multilateral cooperation approaches. The institutional roles of CDM and the NDA under the Ministry of Environment could form as the basis for the governance of carbon markets moving forward. However, we lack proper legal policy, which we currently do not have in place, to really empower the ministry as the national designated authority to issue carbon markets. So this framework has been developed, is submitted to cabinet. We are currently waiting on approval. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that we are having elections this year, so we might be getting a new cabinet. So hopefully that won't delay the approval of this framework. So in order to operationalize the framework, with support from UNDP, we developed what we call a carbon registry using the public digital good. The registry serves as a platform to host variable data on all carbon market projects and programs in the country. However, there were some challenges we faced. Of course, it's developed, it's there, but we are yet to start using it. We have developed it with with an intention of hosting it under the Namibia Statistics Agency. This was really just for sustainability purposes instead of having it on a project-by-project basis. However, we faced some technical problems or technical challenges in Namibia. All government servers are hosted under the Office of the Prime Minister. So we still have some issues to sort out with between the Office of the Prime Minister and the Namibia Statistics Agency. Hopefully we can sort that out very quickly. But lessons learned from that is that we need to enhance market participation with the registry operational. Namibia is positioned to engage in open and carbon trading. Capacity issue, I think this is a common thing for all of us, for all developing countries specifically, that we need to strengthen local expertise through training programs that can accelerate project development and the registry management. Private sector engagement, I think this is something also we came across when we're doing the consultation. There's really very limited private sector engagement in carbon markets, and how do we now bring in the private sector, because they have a very big role to play when it comes to carbon markets. In a nutshell, that's where we are. We are yet to start using the registry, but it's there. Hopefully moving forward from here, we can see which one is the best solution for now. I mean, we had some discussions with Reina to see what are the possible ways which we can, for now, use it while we still find a long-lasting solution, which would basically be between our Office of the Prime Minister and our Statistics Agency. I think in short, I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Regan. I'm going to Rachel next from Côte d'Ivoire, and it's actually the same question. How did Côte d'Ivoire customize the carbon registry so that it fits your country's unique context? And what lessons learned along the way might benefit other countries in similar stages of development, both of the carbon market and also potentially of the registry? And I'll just pass you this mic.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Reina. Thank you, UNDP. Thank you, UNFCCC. I'm Rachel. I'm from the Ministry of Environment, Sustainable Development, and Ecological Transition of Côte d'Ivoire. And I'm the chief of the Carbon Market Office. And we came a long way to the registry. So before coming to the registry, it was important for us to put in place the carbon market framework. So we started 2 years ago with developing our national framework on carbon market and non-market. And at the end of the day, we created the National Carbon Market Office. In last August, we put in place the office, and we also have our manual of procedure, which represents the regulatory framework of all this. And we needed a tool, which is the registry. We started working on the registry early this year, and it took us like 6 to 8 months. It was not very long. I think it took long because of the government, because we have to host the registry in the government platform, and it took a little bit longer. But the context of having a national registry came from our experience in CDM. In CDM, we couldn't monitor anything because everything was managed by the UNFCCC Secretariat, and it was difficult for us to follow up our activities. So thanks to the decision CMA3 on Article 6.2, allowing parties to have access to a registry, Côte d'Ivoire made the choice of having its own registry to record and track all the activities and it moves. the specificity of Côte d'Ivoire's registry is that the tracking and recording cover all types of markets, including the voluntary market, but cover also the non-market mechanism. I think it's important because from the experience we had on CDM, we couldn't follow up the projects developed under the voluntary market, and it was difficult. But now that we have a commitment under the Paris Agreement, I think it's important to have a large overview of what's going on in the country. So we see the registry in the center of all the process. It's a tool that helps us compile and synthesize what we do on the ground. As lesson learned, what I can say is that for the others, there's no need to waste time and start from scratch. Since we already have a tool developed by UNDP, I think it's important to start with this. And also, the registry is the translation of the manual of procedure, because we have the manual and we need to translate it into an electronic tool. So the manual of procedure is the translation of this registry. And the way it is translated, we wanted it to be as simple as possible, because the manual, the registry is intended to the project developers, to the government, also to the validators, the certifiers. So how to develop, to build a tool that will be easy and simple to use. And I think that are the lessons we learned from this. I will leave the other point for maybe the next question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I must say the Côte d'Ivoire registry was very creative. It also added a geospatial function where projects sites can be shown on maps so that you can actually check that there's no, how the projects are overlaying with each other geographically. And it's good for, of course, duplication, but also to identify synergies. So Rachel, congratulations on creating a very interesting registry. So go to Ms. Wee Min from Singapore. So Singapore as a government with such a robust and forward-looking approach to carbon markets, what key functionalities and safeguards do you believe are essential for national registries to ensure transparency, efficiency, and credibility when interacting with global markets?
Thanks very much, Reina and Gemma, for having me here. Maybe just an introduction. Singapore, we're a really small country. If anyone is curious to know, we're barely 700 kilometers square. We don't really have much in terms of natural resources. So the carbon market space is really important to us in terms of a strategy for decarbonization. I think from that context, then it's a bit easier to understand why Singapore, as this tiny little country, is interested and very keen for countries to grow the capability, countries that are able to host countries for carbon credits, to grow the capabilities in having national registries, as well as linking up with the ecosystem registries for interoperability. So I'll start by saying that a registry is like a ledger. We're familiar in the financial markets, how it all works. But actually for carbon credits, it could be quite an analogy of sorts. It's like a ledger where you record kind of the information, such as the generation of a unit, as well as the unique identifiers. So examples being like authorization, first transfers, acquisition, use of towards NDCs. These are some of the unique identifiers that should be sort of captured quite clearly in the ledger, in a national registry. And in our context, because we are one of the first countries that came out with a carbon tax, so our taxable facilities, which are the largest emitters, they do have to either pay a carbon tax, or actually this year we've set aside to say 5% of their carbon tax can be paid through international carbon credits, which is why a national registry for Singapore is really important, because then in the same way that Namibia and Cote d'Ivoire look at it, you do need to know what you're buying and what you're selling and have a very proper registry to track it all. So I think that's why we think that national registries are important, especially in the context of Article 6.2, where in the cooperative approach, we talk about corresponding adjustments and the NDC. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the introduction of why we think national registries are important. I think for indeed the layer of transparency and clarity within the country and also the partner countries who are working with us. And I think the idea of CAT Trust is to round it out such that whatever is happening on the national registry, it's working interoperably with the other kind of registries, transferring information and ensuring transparency on the world front. Yeah.
Thank you. We're becoming experts at passing mics. Thank you so much, women. Also, Gemma from World Bank, it's always such a pleasure to work together with you. Can you please share an example of a country you supported as World Bank in developing a national carbon registry? And again, what were the key lessons learned? And how have you, in your case, if you can add, how have you shaped your ways of capacity building for the other countries that you work with?
Great. Thank you, Reina. And it's a pleasure to be here hosting this event with Digital for Climate and having really insightful country perspectives. So as mentioned before, Digital for Climate is a working group that unites all these multilaterals with the vision of creating an end-to-end digital ecosystem where digital MRVs at project national level, they are seamlessly connecting with the national registry for the issuance of the asset, and then this data is transparently broadcasted to the market. And so in this context, the World Bank, just to give a quick introduction, we provide capacity building and technical assistance to countries, specifically on project level MRV, national registries, and also beyond on global infrastructure and policy. And on the registry, today's topic, we do provide advisory on the design and deployment for these systems. And to give you an example, we have been supporting the Kingdom of Bhutan, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Otherwise, they could explain it better than I will. But essentially, the same as the UNDP, the World Bank developed an off-the-shelf registry system called Core Registry, which, of course, we coordinated together to align the systems, have the same data model. So there are different tools, but similar tools at the same time. And through this off-the-shelf system, we went through a training and a testing environment, and then Bhutan quickly and ably were able to deploy it, and we launched it at the last COP. And this registry has the key tracking functionalities for Article 6 and also enables a transaction functionality, which takes a more innovative approach because it's a decentralized finance model, so a peer-to-peer transaction with some potential benefits to fractionalize these assets and also increase the broader access to participants because we're using digital wallets, which is different from a traditional account. And so Bhutan since then has been operationalizing the registry, so the IT system is fully operational. But as Regan was mentioning, one of the key core components for an IT system like a national registry to be fully operational is to have the right institutional and governance frameworks. And without this, we lag behind. And basically we cannot do all at the same time. We have to sequence it. So some countries may decide to develop the IT system, have it up and running, and then sequence it to the governance framework. Other countries may decide to do the other way around. So another example, we're supporting the government of India to design their BCM registry. And essentially, once they finalize with building the policy framework and governance, they are now building the IT system, and we're helping them design the transaction layer also through a decentralized finance component. And so through this capacity building, we aim to gather all these lessons and challenges and also align it with international standards. And this is linked to your question. How are we trying to fit these capacity building programs to make sure we recommend the best practices to countries to fully implement this? So this is related to another workstream called Carbon Market Infrastructure Working Group. And if you recall, in the last COP, the World Bank released the Carbon Markets Engagement Roadmap, which set up key bottlenecks that need to be addressed to scale up the market. And one key bottleneck, and very explicitly, was carbon market infrastructure. We need to build more robust and more secure national MRV systems. We need to build efficient and scalable national registries. But to do that, what are the key action points? And that's what the working group was launched for, with 30 organizations and more than 85 individuals with the industry. So together we convene exchanges, registry service providers, the key institutions, ICBCM, IOSCO, commodity-related services to brainstorm together and identify a strategic next steps on what are the key areas that we need to work to improve the standards and guidelines. And 3 areas were identified, and we released the roadmap on last week on Monday, and I will send it later to participants. But basically, this roadmap is called Carbon Market Infrastructure Roadmap, and identified 3 areas. The first one is ecosystem governance. So right now, there's a lot of overlap on who are the roles and responsibilities of the different entities across the ecosystem. Registries versus crediting programs, validators, verifiers, like what are the overlaps, gaps, and potential conflicts of interest in the ecosystem governance. And this relates to what colleagues were saying of having a robust institutional framework for making the system operational. The second area was information security and transaction integrity. What we were saying about, you need to have a system that has the right cybersecurity safeguard in place, and also transaction integrity. When we say transaction integrity in infrastructure, what do we mean? We mean that when you execute a transaction in your registry, you need to set up a KYCML, know your client policy, anti-money laundering, anti-bribery and corruption. These safeguards need to be in place for transactions. And the third area is data and systems interoperability. And this area is a very strong component in the D4C working group that we're working with UNFCCC, UNDP, EBRD, and the European Space Agency to make sure that data models, data taxonomies, common frameworks, and systems are all aligned. Otherwise, we have multiple formats of data and completely fragments the market. No? So for example, UNDP registry is now having the same data model through countries. CATRAS is aligned to and I will explain more on the CATRAS, but maybe, I don't know if you have additional time, I will let the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Very rich inputs. Thank you so much. And thank you for raising the important issue of data or actually system governance as well as data governance at different levels. Very important points. Thank you. So let's go through a second round of questions, and hopefully we'll have a few minutes for some questions from the audience as well. Reagan, back to you. So now that Namibia has implemented the first version of the carbon registry, I know you're still yet to start using it, but what challenges and opportunities do the country foresee in actively using it to support the contribution or the participation in the international carbon market?
Yes, thank you, Reina. I can talk about challenges the whole day. It's a norm for developing countries. But yeah, I think during the process of developing the registry, we faced quite a number of challenges. First of all, it took longer than we initially anticipated. Also within the country, like I mentioned, we under the CBIT1 project, the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency project, we developed what we had hoped to be an MRV system, right? But of course, due to limited technical capacity within the country, it didn't turn up to be what we initially envisioned. And the idea was to have this MRV system to be linked to the carbon registry. But however, we are going back to CBIT. Hopefully we'll get CBIT too and try to revise that MRV system so that it really talks to the carbon registry. And of course, we also hope to do some testing, end-to-end testing of the registry using pilot projects, which we had hoped to do by the last quarter. But yeah, of course, due to the delays, we were unable to test it to see if it's really working. And of course, there's generally insufficient training of the registration operators and the local experts. Of course, we mentioned that the registry is to be used by the people who are selling, buying, and everybody. So all of those need to be trained for them really to be conversant with the registry. But all in general, also lack of resources. I mentioned we want this registry to be hosted in a government institution, which is already thin on the ground. I mean, technical capacity, they don't have the right infrastructure to host this, and all of this requires some funding or some financial resources for them to make available. And I personally feel something like a registry must have a dedicated staff unit which will work on it throughout the process. But unfortunately, that seems to be a problem. Like I mentioned to Reina the other day when we were at the meeting, our Namibia Statistics Agency has also its core function, which is census mostly in most cases. But this is you now requiring that institution to broaden its mandate and accommodate this. All of that will require resources to have dedicated personnel.
Thank you so much, Reagan. And it's actually impressive that you thought through this sustainability institutionally from the very beginning. So hopefully we'll all start to work out now. Rachel, now so with the first version of Côte d'Ivoire's carbon registry in place, what are your hopes for its role in supporting Côte d'Ivoire's climate goals? What types of support would be most helpful moving forward to realize your goals?
Okay, thank you for your question. And we are happy to have our registry fully operational, but we faced some big challenges while developing this registry. So the first one was about the difficult collaboration between the ministries, because at some point we're going to issue some authorization, and depending on the step, it will be either the Ministry of Environment or the Ministry of Finance. So it was difficult to collaborate and find a common ground. We had a problem of leadership. So it's important to clearly define the roles of each actor and each stakeholders. And another challenge will be, after the development of this registry, the capacity building of the different users. As government representatives, we don't know well how to use the registry, so it's important to know how to use it and how to connect registries with other registries. As I told you, our registry covers non-market, market, voluntary markets, etc. So we have a large overview of what's going on the country. But for example, we have to connect it to the international registry, which is only about transaction of ITMOs. We also have the registry of Article 6.4, which is managed by the UNFCCC Secretariat, the supervisory body, and it's only about the 6.4 mechanism. So we need to see what is important and how we're going to transfer the specific information to the relevant registries. We also had the problem of, it's not a problem, I think it's solved, but it was important to secure the information put on the registry. And I think Gemma already talked about that. So we need to give access to the different users, and there are different level of access depending on the responsibility. Because all the information need to be checked by the Carbon Market Office before being uploaded on the platform. We also needed to avoid duplication of projects in the same spot, same area. So we also have, I think, solved this problem. We have an automatic display of this kind of problem when we have two projects, for example, on the same spots. So we see the registry as an opportunity for the country to be transparent, because we think the registry is a mirror of what is done at the country level in terms of carbon mechanism. It will help us work together with different partners, and it helps us also manage all the carbon mechanism from only one place. And we really want this registry to be helpful for anyone. And as I said earlier, the first level of intervention would be the capacity building for the use of the tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Women, for Singapore, from your perspective as a buyer in the carbon market, what are the most critical elements you look for in the high integrity carbon credits? And how do national registries play a role in verifying and ensuring these standards?
So good at this now. Passing the mic. Yeah, so yeah, in the context of Singapore, again, I mentioned just now that we lack natural resources and hence we are a buyer country. So what we do is to buy carbon credits. And so the first principle is that the environmental integrity of the carbon credits that we buy must be high, which is why late last year, Singapore actually published what we call an eligibility list. So what this means is that for us to consider carbon credits, we look at 7 factors, and these won't be very sort of foreign to you. I'll just quickly read them to you. We consider first the additionality. So in other words, projects would not occur unless they have sort of a climate financing. Additionality is really important. Then you talk about whether they are real, MRV, whether they can be quantified and verified, whether or not they give for permanence, that they do not harm the local communities and the biodiversity. Also a consideration that there's no leakage, and finally, no double counting. And no double counting is very important to us because if you consider the UNFCCC framework, basically countries to have their own NDCs, and it's only if host countries have excess NDCs can they then look towards climate financing to try and get financing for projects that they would not consider doing in the first place. So the buyer country would also have then be able to buy carbon credits in order to sort of offset our NDC, which is why on the Article 6.2 cooperative approach, there's this idea of a corresponding adjustment where we enter into implementation agreements which are legally binding. And Singapore has been working with a couple of countries on this already. The Singapore-Ghana implementation agreement is one that is already put into force. And I think just last month, we opened a call for projects under the Singapore-Ghana implementation agreement. And we are in the process of looking through the sort of project applications. And indeed, it's aligned, the way we look at sort of the projects is aligned with what I mentioned just now on the 7 attributes in terms of environmental integrity. Yeah, and I think I'll just add one point that we are working with Gold Standard and Vera to publish the Article 6 crediting protocol. Why I mention carbon credit programs is because the voluntary market has already had some work done already, and we really do not need to reinvent the wheel sometimes, even for the compliance market. There are bright spots in the voluntary market and which we can use. And indeed, CCPs like Gold Standard and Vera, they do verify and ensure environmental integrity standards are met. So things like double counting, they will check for within between the host country and the buyer country, and that the carbon credits are actually issued directly from these registries. And that's a very strong point, because if you do not have a national registry, in a sense, you still can use these carbon credit sort of programs, who then issue the you place them on these CCPs, and then you issue from there, and then basically the CCPs interface with my national registry in order for the information to be transferred and for retirement towards the offsets of our taxable facilities. Sorry, it's a little bit technical in terms of the flow. I'm sure you appreciate that. Yeah, but I think it's a process that is needed in terms of transparency and ensuring that the carbon credits do transfer in a proper way from the host country all the way to the buyer. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Gemma, for World Bank, how do you ensure that the capacity building efforts for national carbon registries are aligned with international standards and best practices, as we just heard, but also catering to the specific needs and priorities of the countries that you assist?
Thank you, Reina. And the reality is that we're in a very early stage of implementing, deploying, and development infrastructure for carbon markets. So we are collecting and gathering lessons learned and challenges as we move along. For example, I've learned so much today about the work Regan, Rachel, and Sim women that they have been mentioning on key lessons and key challenges. And we keep also gathering this from our country clients. So key areas that I've heard today and that I keep seeing through my work with other countries is, the first one is policy and governance. Clearly, when you establish a governance, you can solve the who owns the data, who hosts the data, and you can address the bottleneck. Also, what Rachel was saying about user account management. So when you have a clear policy framework, that policy framework for carbon markets will not only address all the institutional arrangements for the market, but will designate the operator. Who is your operator of the registry? Is it the Ministry of Environment? Is it the Ministry of Finance? Is it the Ministry of IT, together with these lines of ministries? And then once you have the operator, you may have an administrator that will actually make the decisions and authorizations of these actions. So it's really a complex space, and you need to distill it in a simplified way so there is an efficient implementation. And the second one is on the technology itself. Obviously, we need to choose a technology model that is sustainable and long-term, and it's not being a bottleneck for whoever is implementing it. And when countries come to us and ask what is the best option, there's three options that you can go through when choosing a technology. One is you decide to develop from scratch. So you may have a very strong IT team in your ministry in-house, and you develop a TOR with the business requirements, and you develop the full thing, because you may have a bigger ambition on integrating this with an ETS registry and with other digital systems. For example, the case of India, they are building from scratch with their own IT team. Another option is that because you have lower resources or you don't want to bear with an upfront cost and you don't have these IT resources, is that you leverage an off-the-shelf system. So the UNDP registry, the World Bank registry, these are open source solutions, less customizable compared to others, but they are really simplified and efficient. Or the other option is that there's registry service providers. So S&P Global, Expansive, Eco Registry, they have a software as a service model. So you can pay on a monthly basis. But what are the downsides? You don't own fully the system. You may want to customize it further. And finally, you can also wait for Article 6.2 International Registry, which in the next room, they are negotiating the final functionalities. Will it be pull and view? Will it include issuance? definitely not transaction, since transaction is an optional functionality as per the decision of 6.2. So there's no better or worse option. It really depends on capacities, preferences, and resources, and that's what we tell countries. And last but not least, once you have figured out the policy and the governance and the technology solution, how do you make sure that the data in your registry is fully accessible to the market, to potential buyers and investors, and it's also harmonized in a way that it makes sense? And Sim Wee Min was mentioning a very good point on double counting, and this is a good segue for me to mention the Climate Action Data Trust. And the Climate Action Data Trust is an initiative by the government of Singapore, by AITA and the World Bank, and the aim was that 2 years ago, like if you wanna find where is the carbon markets data in one place, you didn't know where to go. Like where is the database where you can see all the projects and units issued? So we prototyped this platform with the aim that all national registries, like any country with a national registry, would connect through an API, an application program interface, automatically or manually, to this platform, broadcasting their national data through a common taxonomy. So all the data from all the registries as independent standards and countries is broadcast in one platform. And today, after 2 years and a lot of work, we have almost 90% of the data there. You can Google the dashboard of CATRUST. We have BERA, GCC, and Gold Standard already connected. We also web scrap the data from CDM to ensure alignment, and we have the country of Bhutan and many other countries in the line to connect. And of course, UNDP registry and core registry have set up some steps so the countries who uses these systems, they can connect to the platform. And the aim is not only to provide transparency, because these national registries may be maybe internally facing. So how you would know what is the data in Bhutan's registry or in Ghana's registry? If they connect to CATRUST, anyone can see. So it's transparency, but also double counting. So this platform has a layer of a distributed ledger technology, just to provide this immutable and tamper-proof record of data, so you can trace back any change and see if there's any double counting on the project. And this will allow this foundational harmonized data that other service providers in the market can use this data and build business around it, right? So if an agency is doing ratings or they're doing data analytics, they can like take the data from the Climate Action Data Trust and maybe build an AI algorithm to screen double counting. And that's for the market to do and to nurture these businesses. So that would be, in a nutshell, like key common practices that we're seeing, what we're recommending. But again, we're in a very exciting but also early stage, and we hope to keep learning more so we can deliver more systematic guidance to countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. So we have 3 more minutes, so maybe we can take one question from the audience. I think you were first. Yes. Hopefully we'll come to you.
Thanks so much, Reina. Thank you for this great panel, everyone. So my name is Hani Othman. I'm part of the HBAR Foundation Sustainable Impact Fund. So I'll do my question very quickly. So my question is mainly on how do you transfer knowledge on methodologies to really evolve on high quality projects? And how do you highlight then the unique attributes of every single project in order to create a healthy environment of ambition? And leading into the final question, do you feel like digitizing and open sourcing methodologies is a helpful tool in order to enable this? And this question is for anybody who feels called to answer it.
That was many. Thank you, Anya. Anybody who can answer? I can mention on the methodology digitalization part, I do think that is very important just to make sure that there's more transparency. Again, also going back to UNFCCC's efforts in digitizing the methodologies, I do think it needs to go to the next level where it's truly digital native, not just a digitizing something into document, but actually making sure that the methodology can be reused by different entities and different systems in one way. I think it's also part of the ecosystem that we've been thinking about. Great. Okay, yes, there's another question over there. We all need to get good at passing mics around.
Hello, everyone. it's not a question, it's just a small contribution. From experience I hear from the country presentation, I'm Bakatu, I'm coming from Benin. I'm project manager. That's why I have too few contribution. To develop a solution like as important as you are developing, I think that there is two main keys that we need to take care of. The first is before to design the project, we have to take care of each stakeholders to know each person, each organization that will have to interact with the project to use the solution, so that we have to first analyze each stakeholders to know how to engage all of them, how to keep them engaged during all the projects. Then that can include institutional arrangements to specialize or to specify each organization role, their responsibility. Then you will not have the problem you have now to link with some ministers or some agency. That is my first point. The second point is about change management. Sometimes in managing project, like in digital project management, we used to consider change management like wasting time, but it's very important to take it in account when we are designing our project, so that we can avoid or anticipate any potential conflict, any potential resistance among people or among organizations that are stakeholders. That is my small contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good observations and contributions. Yes, final question.
Hello, good afternoon to you all. My name is Hari Prasad Sharma. I represent the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal, and looking after the carbon section, carbon-related matter. I have a very simple question, simple curiosity, but is Nepal is started to work to implement the Article 6.2. We are going to sign with the government of Sweden by day after tomorrow. And also we are linking with the government of Korea and other country as well. In this context, I want to know what are the key prerequisite minimum conditions that have to be fulfilled by the country to establish and operationalize the carbon registry. Please suggest the legal, institutional, and managerial aspect. Thank you.
I can start and perhaps pass it to Gemma, please. I do think the first thing, and then maybe Rachel can talk to this, is the carbon market framework. So it is very important that you have the framework first. And then as the lady from Benin was saying, have this institutional setup and the governance thought through at the beginning before going into the actual development of the tool as a registry. And I think, but at the same time, I must say that it's not a linear process. Once you start to look into the registry, what kind of system do you want to do, and start to engage with the stakeholders around the designing of it, that is also a good process for that also feeds back into the framework as well as the institutional setup discussions. So I would say it is a little bit of an iterative process, but to work on these three in a parallel would be one thing to say from my end, as because we've been supporting with the two countries as UNDP, and it's been a very interesting learning process that this came out. Gemma, would you like to add?
Sure, no, I think you covered very well, and great question, and this would take us, I would stay here and discuss this for hours, right? But basically, if we look at what is the minimum and required by Paris Agreement, first, like in your policy framework, having designated an operator. Who will be your operator? So you can already look them in from early stage. Once you have the operator, The key functionalities that you need to have to comply with Article 6 is tracking. That's for sure. Tracking IDMOs, tracking the IDs, tracking the actions of retirement, transfer, holding, and then also having the serial number of those IDMOs. Then beyond this, as an option, you can identify through the framework that Reina was mentioning, how do you want to add a transaction functionality in-house your registry, or you want to link to a trading platform, no? So and we can go through an spectrum of required to more optional, and we do have, and I can share this like a checklist of optional versus mandatory to give you a guideline on progressing towards this. But happy to discuss this after the session.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I think that will conclude the panel. Thank you so much for the panelists for such an inspiring discussion. Thank you for the great questions from the audience. And I'll just pass it to Massamba for closing us off.
Not take too long, just some keyword. So your discussion inspired me several things. The first is the fact that the registry should not be considered separated from the rest of the infrastructure that are needed to implement all the functionalities that are required to have transparency, to have effectiveness, to have efficiency, cost effectiveness of the system. It needs to be considered as a holistic system. Of course, it will be central to have a registry, but it needs to be connected to a digital MRV, for example. It needs to be connected to a smart contract with digital methodology. It needs to be connected to some other equipment, so that all in all, we can achieve all the objectives of transparency, environmental integrity, consistency, being able to have something that is broadly applicable, connected to the rest of the world, while taking into account the specificity of the country. So thank you for your great contribution. It was our pleasure to host this very interesting panel, and looking forward to make things happen on the ground through D4C. Thank you.